Hello everyone. Welcome to Story Hub channel. Discover real stories of wife betrayals, shocking twists and turns and their secrets. Hit the subscribe button and get to our story. My name's Mike Harris, and back then, I was just your average young guy in our small Scandinavian town. Life was good. I finished vocational school and did my time in the army as an anti-aircraft technician. After that, I landed a solid job with a company that specialized in rebuilding and installing industrial machinery. That Saturday, the one that would change everything for me, I was 23 and still single. My best friend's new girlfriend had invited me to a party. The party was set up as a Dutch treat and was supposed to kick off in the evening. When I rang the doorbell at the house where it was being held, I got quite the surprise. The door was opened by Rachel Morgan. Now, Rachel was pretty, no doubt about that, but I wasn't exactly a fan. We hardly ever talked, mostly because she struck me as stuck-up and looked down on us blue-collar guys. I never got why, especially since she worked in her parents' shoe store, which wasn't exactly a big deal. She was seeing this guy, Kevin Thompson, the spoiled son of some rich guy from the fancy side of town. I'd had a grudge against Kevin ever since he used his dad's money and a new Mercedes to steal my girlfriend. He even had the nerve to spread pictures of their little affair around before ditching her. When someone poured a can of paint on that shiny new Mercedes, Kevin's dad even wrote angry letters to the local paper. Kevin tried to pin it on me but quickly backed off when some guys from my neighborhood made it clear things could get ugly for him. When I showed up at the party, Rachel gave the bottle of VAT 69 scotch. I'd brought a disgusted look and sneered, "So you drink that stuff to make yourself feel like a real man?" I shot back, "No, it's just what I had on hand." She pressed on, "But you can't resist drinking it, can you?" Wanting to end the conversation, I threw out an offer I was sure she'd never take. "I can, if I've got better things to do. There's a great band playing at Park Hall tonight. If you come dancing with me, I'll stay sober, and I'll drive." Rachel looked at me with even more disdain, but noticing that the room had gone quiet and all eyes were on us, she suddenly smiled and said, "My pleasure." The crowd clapped as she took the bottle from me, set it on the table, and said, "Come on, darling." As soon as we were out the door, Rachel's smile vanished and she snapped, "Why the hell did you put on that show for me?" "Look on the bright side," I replied. "You're spending a sober Saturday night with a decent guy." "Decent guy? You're a crazy nerd," she shot back. We didn't exchange another word until we reached my car. I cursed myself for being so chatty, which had landed me on this stupid date with a girl I couldn't stand. I knew I'd be getting a ton of questions the next day, so I decided to stick to my word and headed for the dance hall. Rachel must have guessed my thoughts because she barked, "Don't you chicken out. This was your idea, so just shut up and drive." She turned on the radio, listening to music for about 10 or 15 minutes before turning to me and asking, "You didn't expect me to actually agree to this so-called date, did you?" "No," I admitted. She smiled sweetly, and I couldn't help but notice how stunning she looked when she did. "But I did agree," she added. "Yeah, you did, and we're going. Let's try to forget the bad vibes and have a good time." Rachel smiled again and asked, "You serious?" "Yeah." "Deal." We kept the conversation light until we reached the dance floor. Our first dance was fast-paced, and to my surprise, Rachel turned out to be an amazing dancer. She even suggested we stay on the floor for a couple more songs before grabbing some appetizers. Throughout the evening, I danced with different girls, but found myself coming back to Rachel, who didn't sit down even once. She saved the last dance for me, and as we danced, she held me close. On the drive home, Rachel fell asleep almost as soon as we hit the road, and only woke up when we pulled back into our town. I nudged her awake to ask where she lived. When we parked in front of her apartment, she said, "Thanks for a nice evening. I'll call you later." That seemed like the end of it. The night had been enjoyable, even for me. I wasn't holding my breath for her to actually call, so it was a pleasant surprise when Rachel rang me up on Thursday night. She suggested we go to the dance hall the following Saturday, since a popular band was going to be performing. I agreed to drive her, and before we ended the call, she mentioned that her friend Megan might join us. Saturday night rolled around, and I showed up at Rachel's apartment almost on time. A few minutes later, she came out, but to my surprise, she climbed into the back seat, and then Kevin Thompson slid in next to her. I wasn't about to let myself be humiliated like that. I cut the engine, got out of the car, walked around, opened the back door on Kevin's side, and yanked him out, letting him hit the ground. Rachel ducked down, but I saw a strange look cross her face as I shouted, "This car doesn't haul trash." Kevin was pretty plastered, so it took him a minute to get up and try to take a swing at me. I sidestepped his wild punch and sent him back to the ground with one solid hit. Then, I dragged him over to the bench near the entrance of Rachel's building and plopped him down there. Rachel stayed quiet while I dealt with Kevin. As I headed back to the car, I told her, "Get in the front seat." I didn't really expect her to listen, but to my surprise, she did. And as she settled in, she said, "I'm sorry." She explained that Megan had planned to join us but came down with the flu. Kevin had shown up at Rachel's place uninvited, bringing along a bottle of wine. Rachel had only had one glass, while Kevin downed the rest. He had assured her that there were no hard feelings between us and asked if he could tag along to the dance hall. She added that Kevin had been something of a boyfriend in the past, but now they were just friends. Rachel and I ended up having a great time at the dance hall, and this time she stayed awake on the drive back. When we arrived at her place, she said she wasn't in the mood for anything more. But if I could put those thoughts aside, I was welcome to come up for a cup of tea and a sandwich. I agreed. Rachel's one-bedroom apartment was nicely furnished, with high-end furniture, no doubt funded by her parents. She had even bought 2 large prawn sandwiches in advance. I didn't leave until around 3 a.m. on Sunday morning, and before I left, we made plans to have lunch together later that day. Over lunch at a small restaurant, she filled me in on the latest about Kevin. Apparently, after we left him on that bench, he headed to the pub for another drink and then took a cab to the dance hall, determined to get back at me. But when he got there, he was so drunk they wouldn't let him in, and he ended up getting into a fight with the guy at the ticket booth. A police patrol was nearby, and after the scuffle, they hauled him off to the station for the night. A few weeks later, Kevin lost his driver's license for a year after getting caught speeding multiple times. The high fines from those Saturday nights, added to the speeding tickets, finally became too much for the authorities. Within a few months, he had spiraled into alcoholism and started hanging out with the local crew of unemployed drunks who gathered in the park for drinking sessions. Rachel and I were pleasantly surprised by how well we clicked and how often we saw eye to eye on things. She was stunning, and I was eager to take our relationship to the next level as soon as possible, but Rachel wasn't in any rush. Later on, she confessed that she had already developed feelings for me, but was scared that I might just use her to get back at Kevin and then dump her. That couldn't have been further from the truth. I had genuine feelings for her and had no intention of walking away. It was actually Rachel's parents who set the stage for us to finally give in to temptation. They had planned a week-long vacation in Madeira, but her mom's divorced sister got into a car accident, so Rachel's mom decided to stay back and help her. Her dad wasn't too bothered about missing the trip, so they handed the tickets to Rachel. She sold one of them to me for half the price, and the travel agency was cool with changing the reservation. Madeira is a Portuguese island in the Atlantic, about a 5-hour flight from Scandinavia. It's famous for its Madeira wine and vibrant exotic flowers. We took off early in the morning and arrived around 1 p.m. at a fantastic 5-star hotel in the hotel zone, just outside Funchal, the island's capital. Since we'd had an early start to the day, we decided to take a siesta in the afternoon. And, of course, in the spirit of Latin American traditions, our siesta didn't just involve sleeping. Rachel and I had far more exciting plans once we got into bed. She asked me, "Do you love me?" Looking her straight in the eye, I replied honestly, "Yes, Rachel, I do. I love you very much." She smiled and said, "I love you too." It was like a floodgate opening. Our intense emotions took over, and our only goal was to get each other naked as fast as possible, which didn't take long. We had dinner at the hotel that night, and afterward, before drifting off to sleep after what had been a long but wonderful day, we indulged in our passion once more. The next morning, after some quick intimacy, we jumped into our rental car and set off to explore this romantic island. We had a blast by the pool, but we also spent a lot of time driving around, seeing all the sights, like the once-forgotten isolated valleys around Funchal. We visited the famous wine house, where, according to legend, A man condemned to death was granted his last wish to be drowned in a massive barrel of Madeira wine. One day, we took a long hike along a Levada irrigation system in the mountains. The notorious donkey trail on a steep mountainside was an unforgettable experience that left Rachel looking pretty pale. We spent our last night on the island at Casino Madeira. We started with a fantastic dinner and a show at their renowned restaurant, did some light gambling that nearly paid for the evening, and then danced the night away at the casino's nightclub. We didn't discuss the future much during the trip, but on the last night at the hotel, we started talking about what we'd do once we got back home. Rachel suggested I move in with her to save on rent. I agreed. A year later, we bought a house together, and another year after that, we got married. Almost a year after our wedding, we welcomed our son, Jack, and 15 months later, our daughter, Emily. We were a typical family now, and things were going well between Rachel and me, aside from the usual minor arguments. Time flew by, and we still loved each other deeply as we celebrated our 10th anniversary with a big party. Many of our friends were already divorced, and some had even remarried. Rachel's best friend, Megan, had gone through 2 failed marriages and was now bragging that she'd met the love of her life online. But everything started to unravel just a couple of months after our big anniversary celebration. It wasn't an overnight change, but I knew Rachel well enough to notice a subtle shift in how she was acting toward me almost right away. Naturally, I asked if she was feeling unwell, if something was bothering her, if I'd done something wrong, or if there was anything I should have done differently. She denied any changes and tried to assure me that everything was fine. But as our relationship slowly cooled, I couldn't shake the thought that if some of her friends were cheating on their husbands, maybe Rachel had decided to give it a try too. Yet, I couldn't find any clues. She wasn't dressing more provocatively, she wasn't wearing extra makeup, she wasn't working late, she didn't have any extra girls' nights out planned, and there weren't any suspicious phone calls. Nothing out of the ordinary. I figured she had to be pretty darn clever if she was avoiding all the typical signs of cheating. With a heavy heart, I decided that for the first time since we met, I'd start looking for evidence of cheating in her personal belongings. I went through her drawers, searching for any new lingerie, but there was nothing. The laundry basket was empty of any surprises. I checked her credit card accounts, but everything seemed normal. There was nothing unusual on the phone bills. I even went through her laptop, looking for secret email accounts, but came up empty. I inspected her car and found nothing, not even on the surveillance meter I'd left there. The only thing left to check was her cell phone, and I got my chance when she left it charging one night while she went bowling. Sneaking the phone down to my workshop in the basement, I thought, "Rachel, my dear, it's now or never that I'll uncover your deception." I read through all the text messages, listened to every voicemail, and jotted down all the unfamiliar numbers for outgoing and incoming calls. I even checked the pictures she'd taken with her phone's camera. There were no photos sent to other phones or emails, and none received. After looking up the numbers online, I was 100% convinced that there was nothing suspicious on Rachel's phone, leaving me with only 2 possible explanations for her growing coldness toward me in bed. Either she was cheating but was so crafty about it that I'd never find proof, or she wasn't cheating, but for some unknown reason, she'd lost her love for me and was so fed up with me that she was likely planning to leave before starting a relationship with someone else. I needed to know the truth, so the next time she turned me down in bed, I asked, "What did I do wrong to lose your love?" "Did I say I didn't love you?" she shot back. "Did you?" I responded. "Of course I love you, but why the hell can't you just accept that I'm tired? Do you have any plans or decisions about our future that I should know about?" I pressed, trying to clear the air. "No, but if I do, I'll let you know. Please, just let me sleep." "I'm tired," she said. She wasn't giving me any clear signs about our lost love, so I decided to back off and give her a month to get our relationship back on track. If things didn't improve or got worse, I'd have to figure out a new approach. 2 weeks later, life threw me a curveball. 8 of us guys from town headed to the capital to watch our national soccer team play Northern Ireland in a qualifying match for the European Championships that were set to be held in Austria and Switzerland the following year. The game didn't go as well as we'd hoped, so we hit up a bar afterward to drown our disappointment in a few drinks. That's when I happened to meet Claire. Claire was a stunning woman in her 30s, stylishly dressed with a bright smile that immediately lifted my spirits. She was alone at the bar, and I ended up taking the empty stool next to her. We started chatting, and before long, it felt like we were old friends. I quickly noticed the 2 gold rings on her finger, and as I guessed from her accent, she confirmed that she was from the northern part of the country. She owned a souvenir shop, had spent the last 2 days in the capital for a trade show, and had a flight booked for noon the next day. I shared a bit about myself, explaining why I was in the bar, which she had already guessed. She noticed my wedding ring, and I was a bit taken aback when she asked how long I'd been married and if I was still happy. I gave her the honest truth. No, I'm not happy, and I have a feeling I'm about to be dumped, but I can't figure out why my wife might be planning to leave me. Claire nodded, saying there was some confusion in her marriage too. Discussing serious matters in a noisy bar wasn't ideal, so Claire suggested we move to the piano bar at her hotel, just 2 blocks away. I agreed, but when we got there it was just as crowded. I didn't mind when she suggested we go up to her room and grab a drink from the minibar instead. With drinks in hand, Claire started opening up about her marriage, which was in deep trouble. She had caught her husband with one of her best friends at their cottage. In response, she immediately put the cottage up for sale and had just received a much higher offer than she'd expected from a broker. Despite everything, she still loved her husband. He was a good father to their 2 kids, and she wasn't planning on divorcing him, but she was determined to teach him an unforgettable lesson. After I finished telling her about how Rachel had suddenly and inexplicably lost all interest in being intimate with me, I looked Claire straight in the eye, took her hand, and said softly, "I can't help but feel like it's some kind of fate that we, 2 people going through rough times, have met. It feels like it must mean something." She leaned into me and whispered, "That's exactly how I feel, and I'm so thankful to have met a man who truly understands what I'm going through." I kissed her, and the intensity of her response took me by surprise. I felt a surge of arousal and a sense of euphoria, like I had gained everything and lost nothing. We got up from the couch and began to undress each other slowly. Claire had a beautiful body, and I kissed her in all the right places until she moaned with pleasure. Then she got off the bed and dimmed the lights until the room was almost dark. After a quick shower, we found 2 small bottles of sparkling wine in the minibar and sat together for a while, enjoying the moment. It was a fantastic night, and by the time I snuck back into my hotel room, it was already 4:30 a.m. I managed to slip into bed without waking up the buddy I was sharing the room with. My friends, of course, noticed I'd disappeared from the bar the night before. They teased me over breakfast and threw out a bunch of stupid questions on the ride home, but I stuck to my story that I'd just been talking, and I was pretty sure none of them would say anything to Rachel. Back at home, everything was business as usual. Rachel didn't even seem to notice that I'd been gone for almost 2 days. Only the kids were excited to see me back. On Tuesday, I had to stay at work until 6:30, and when I got home, I was in for a surprise. Rachel met me at the door in a short black skirt, a silky top, and dark stockings. She told me dinner was ready in the dining room. Our dining room, separated by an archway from the living room, was only used on special occasions. We usually preferred eating in the kitchen. I couldn't help but feel suspicious about such an unusual dinner on a regular Tuesday. I had a strange sense that this might be the last dinner before she left me, but I decided to play along and see what happened. As we were eating dessert, Rachel asked, "Do you want to know why we're having a celebration today?" Both the kids and I answered, "Yes." She continued, "I've been let go. My parents sold the shoe store today, and the new owner doesn't want me. I'll be finishing up on Saturday, get my 6 months severance pay, and then I'll be free to do whatever I want." Our son, Jack, asked, "You mean Grandpa fired you? That's kind of cool." Rachel replied, "Not exactly. We just found a better solution." Our daughter Emily chimed in. "Did you find a new job or are you going to stay home?" Rachel responded, "No, I don't have any plans yet. I wanted to tell you all first." I didn't say anything, just started coughing, and Rachel gave me a strange look, but stayed quiet until the kids left the table. Then she explained that her parents had reconnected with an old friend who convinced them to invest in a vacation project down in southern Spain. They decided to retire and move there. Rachel admitted that they got a good price for the stores, but thought the project was risky. She resisted the idea but lost out in the end. So this dinner was meant to celebrate her newfound freedom from her parents in every way. Rachel acknowledged that our marriage wasn't in the best shape and promised to do everything she could to get it back on track. I asked, "Was your damn shoe store the only reason you were neglecting me, or were you having an affair? You've been acting like a cheater ever since our anniversary." She got angry and shouted, "Hell no! Haven't I had enough trouble dealing with my parents?" I shot back. "Then why didn't you tell me about the problems with the store?" It was a family matter, and we wanted to keep it in the family. I had never been so furious with her. A family matter? Am I not part of this family? What do you see me as? Just some guy who lives here? You lied to me when I asked if something was wrong. Why didn't you tell me the truth? Don't you trust me? She started to sob. Of course I trust you, but I didn't want to burden you with my problems. You neglected me, and I started thinking you were cheating with some random guy. Do you think it would have been fun planning a divorce if that had been true? Rachel burst into loud tears, and both of our kids rushed back, yelling at us to stop fighting. Without saying a word, she stormed off into the bedroom. What was supposed to be a dinner to celebrate a new beginning for our marriage ended in complete disaster. The only silver lining was realizing that she hadn't been cheating on me. But if she'd just told me about her issues, it would have saved me a lot of unnecessary heartache. It hurt to know that my wife thought of me more like a stranger or a tenant than a true family member. Wednesday passed quietly in our house, but on Thursday night, when Rachel got home very late from work, everything blew up again. Now it was Rachel's turn to explode. The moment she walked in, she started yelling, "You bastard!" accusing me of cheating. But what the hell did you do? I didn't accuse you. I just said you were acting like a cheater. Now she was crying and sobbing. How could you do this to me? I'm sorry. It was a terrible mistake. I genuinely thought you were planning to leave me. What do you think I'm going to do now? Please, don't make any decisions until you've calmed down. How could you? I'm sorry. But how could you do this to me? You neglected me, and I thought you wanted to get rid of me. It was a huge mistake, and I'm deeply sorry. Do you love her? Have you been in touch with her since then? No. I only love you and no one else. Can I see your cell phone? Yes. I handed her my cell phone, and she went through it thoroughly. I had nothing to hide, so she eventually handed it back to me. Then she asked, "Was she a prostitute? Did you pay for her? Don't you know about diseases?" I replied, "No. She wasn't a prostitute, and I didn't pay her a dime. She's married and was upset because her husband cheated on her. I was sad because I thought you were going to leave me. We mostly just talked and agreed that keeping our marriages together was the best thing for both of us." Are you suggesting I should do what she did? No, because she walked in on her husband and her best friend in the middle of it at their summer house. She sold the cottage, but she's never been able to get over what she saw. Please understand that none of this would have happened if you had just been honest with me about your problems. I'm deeply sorry for what I did, but I was certain you were about to leave me. You're going to sleep in the spare room, and the only thing I want to hear from you is a short answer if I ask you anything. Is that clear? Yes, it is. And please remember, no matter how this sad story ends, I will always love you. A man who loves his wife doesn't cheat on her. Now shut up. The evening went by in silence, but when dinner was ready, she told me this, and to my great relief, she didn't mention divorce. Fixing our marriage would be a long and difficult road, but at least she hadn't left me. On Friday afternoon, she called to say she was going to the pub with a work colleague and ended the conversation before I could say anything. I did the necessary chores around the house and made dinner for the kids. Then I got a call from Harry Brown, the owner of a prefab factory. He mentioned that he and his family had been customers of Rachel's shoe store for years and were always impressed with how well she took care of them. When he heard she had to quit, he wanted to offer her a job at his company because she was exactly the kind of person he needed for customer service, someone who could handle the complaints and misunderstandings from his customers. He gave me his phone number and said she could call him until 10 p.m. that evening. Around 9 p.m., I heard the sound of a car pulling into the driveway, and within seconds, Rachel was inside the house. But she wasn't alone. She had a good-looking guy with her, probably a few years younger than me. He was holding a DVD case, clearly a pornographic movie. Rachel introduced him as Nick, led him into our living room, and told me they'd be watching the movie and didn't want to be disturbed. I told Rachel about Harry Brown's job offer and that he was expecting her to call him as soon as she got home. She seemed to know who Brown was because she took the cordless phone from the kitchen and went into the bedroom to make the call in private. I walked into the living room where Nick was sitting on the two-seater couch, waiting for Rachel. I explained to him, "Rachel and I are having serious marriage problems, and she brought you here to humiliate me. But I'm not going to tolerate that in my house, so I'm asking you politely to leave. Now." Nick stayed put and smirked. "Rachel invited me here. And what are you going to do if I refuse to leave?" "Nothing. But don't blame me if I forget to open the window when I kick you out." He still didn't budge, just grinned and said, "You're a funny guy. Really funny." Determined to take action, I punched him hard in the face, first with my right fist and then with my left. He lost his balance but didn't fight back as I yanked him off the couch and dragged him out of the house. I gave him one last kick and told him to get off my property before I lost my patience. He left without saying another word. While waiting for Rachel, I turned off the lights in the living room and started the movie. When she walked in, she didn't notice me sitting on the couch and exclaimed, "I got the job! Now we can mess with my damn husband." Then she realized I was the one on the couch and shrieked, "Where's Nick?" "What did you do?" I just told him the truth, that we were in trouble, and asked him to leave. She wasn't satisfied and demanded, "Turn off that movie and tell me the truth." I already did. He didn't want to leave, so I convinced him. As you know, I don't tolerate crap, and I never will. I don't know who this Nick guy is or why he was here. A week of silence followed between us. The next Saturday was Rachel's last day at work, and she spent the evening with her parents. We didn't speak again until the Saturday night party we were invited to. Before we left the house, she laid down her conditions. "Don't pretend we're doing well. Stay away from me, and don't try to socialize. Don't drink so we can take a cab home." I agreed to her terms. At the party, I kept my distance and avoided dancing because of my injured knee. Instead, I focused on figuring out which of the 7 friends who were with me at the match had told Rachel that I hadn't spent the night in my bed. One of the younger guests, after learning that I was Rachel Harris's husband, informed me that she was Nick's sister. Her older sister, who worked with Rachel at the shoe store, had suggested that Nick pretend to be Rachel's lover. Neither Nick's wife nor Nick himself had any hard feelings toward me. They just saw it all as a joke. Rachel was more talkative than usual and flirted with the guys on the dance floor, but I didn't let it bother me until she came over and said she was ready to call it a night. We walked home in silence, and she thanked me for sticking to the agreement. I replied that I would always love her, no matter what. The next morning after breakfast, once the kids had gone off to play, she thanked me again and asked if I held any grudge against her for her behavior the previous night. I responded, "I love you, and I don't blame you for it. I'm sorry for what I did, and I hope you can forgive me. I don't know how to respond to that because you showed your love in a very strange way. I regret it, and I'll regret it for the rest of my life." She then talked about her new job, and I was amazed at how well she was being paid. She didn't mention divorce, which gave me a faint glimmer of hope that our marriage might be salvageable, but I knew it would take time. Over the next few days, our relationship showed signs of improvement. Rachel began to open up a bit more and even asked me about things that had happened over the past week that she hadn't shown any interest in before. When I informed her on Wednesday night that I'd need to work late on Friday installing some important equipment, she didn't seem to mind. She mentioned her own plans for Friday, including going to a bachelorette party with Monica and 2 other friends, and had already arranged for her parents to keep the kids overnight. On Friday morning, she confirmed that her parents had agreed to babysit. We didn't start work until after the plant closed at 4 p.m., as several other machines had to be moved to make space for the new equipment. By 7 p.m., we discovered that the foundation had been built for the wrong model of machine, which stalled the installation. When I finally got home around midnight, I couldn't sleep, worried about the job. Then I heard a car pull into the driveway and Rachel's voice talking to someone outside. They moved into the kitchen, and, feeling protective of my home, I quietly opened the door to listen in on their conversation. Rachel seemed sober as she thanked the man for the ride. He responded, "It's my pleasure to help such a fine woman." She offered him coffee, to which he replied, "Let's hold off on the coffee. It'll taste better afterward." Rachel's tone shifted and she asked, "After what? What are you talking about?" He replied, "Come on, don't play dumb. You left John, and now you want a real man tonight, don't you?" Her voice rose as she said, "He's not a wimp. I love him, and I'm never leaving him. I don't care who he is because tonight you're mine. Stop this nonsense, or I'll tell John. You can go ahead and tell John how easily I divorced you, because that's exactly what I'm going to do if you don't shut up and get out of here now." She was yelling, "Get out of my house or I'll call the police." He raised his voice, shouting, "Don't you dare even try, you damn tease. You led me on last Saturday and now it's payback time. Do as I say, or would you rather get it the hard way?" I'd heard enough. When he grabbed her and tried to force a kiss on her, I rushed in and landed my first punch, catching him completely off guard. After that, my fists connected with his face in a quick succession of blows, with little resistance from him. It was then that I realized the would-be rapist was none other than Tommy Larson, an old friend of ours. He and his wife, Karen, had been regulars at our parties over the years. I'd always known him as a decent guy, so I couldn't fathom how he had turned into such an animal, deciding that Rachel was easy prey. I dragged him to the door, threw him out of the house, and warned him that if he wasn't off my property within 20 seconds, things would get serious. Back inside, I hugged my sobbing wife, trying to comfort her. After a while, when she'd calmed down a bit, I called Karen and told her the truth about what had just happened in our home. She asked to speak to Rachel, who explained that she and Monica couldn't get a cab, so they bumped into Tommy at a hot dog stand. He offered to drive them home in exchange for a cup of coffee. Knowing him well, Rachel agreed, thinking he was a good guy. Tommy had been decent enough while dropping Monica off at her place, but things changed once they got to our kitchen. Apparently, Karen had had enough of him by now, because she told me what a jerk he had been to her over the past year, even though he had always stopped short of hitting her in the face when he got violent. I made us some coffee, and we sat down in the living room for a frank talk about our problems. I started by explaining why I was home that night instead of at work. Rachel told me that her plan had been to get away from him, lock herself in the bathroom, and use the phone there to call me. If Tommy had tried to break down the door, she would have called our neighbor Kent and the police. And if he'd managed to break in before she could get help, she intended to spray him in the eyes with hairspray. I agreed that she'd thought it through well. Then we moved on to discussing the issues in our marriage. Rachel confessed that she deeply regretted not telling me about her problems at the shoe store. She also revealed that Monica was the one who informed her about my infidelity. Apparently, one of my soccer buddies, she didn't know which one, had told his wife, who then shared it with her best friend, who in turn told Monica. Rachel was devastated and had initially wanted to kick me out of the house, but Monica had managed to calm her down, convincing her not to do anything rash. We both acknowledged that Monica played a huge role in saving our marriage, as she persuaded Rachel to let me stay in the house and not bring up divorce until she was certain whether her love for me was strong enough to forgive and save our relationship. Rachel looked me straight in the eye as she told me that she never had any intention of cheating on me for revenge. She had decided to forgive me after spending that first sleepless night alone in our bedroom. But she admitted that she was so fed up with me at the time that she couldn't pretend everything was fine in our relationship, even though it was far from it. The whole drama with Nick was just a silly game, a mistake suggested by his sister, who worked at the shoe store. Rachel didn't know Nick personally and had actually given up on the idea, but she was talked into playing out this little drama to teach me a lesson. She warned Nick that I wasn't someone to mess with, and he promised to back off if I got really angry. He didn't, and as a result, his wife often teased him about the black eye, thinking it was his own fault. Neither Nick nor his wife held any grudge against Rachel or me. Rachel mentioned that she had promised to invite Nick and his wife over for dinner once we had settled our marital issues. We talked until the early morning, and then I followed her to our bed, where we cuddled together and fell asleep. When we woke up around 11 on Saturday, We had the best sex we'd had in years, probably since that week we spent in Madeira. We both made a vow to never cheat on each other again. It was a fantastic day for me, though I had to postpone any plans to celebrate that Saturday night because I had to get back to work on the installation project. But of course, the following weekend, we had a very romantic celebration. A week after the incident, Karen filed for divorce, and Tommy left town. Rachel kept her word and invited Nick and his wife, Camille, over for dinner. Nick turned out to be a laid-back guy, and Camille was a sweet woman with a great sense of humor and a knack for storytelling. We all had a good laugh when she recounted her reaction to poor Nick coming home with a black eye. Since that night when we stayed up talking and worked through our issues, Rachel and I haven't brought up my cheating again. We're as happy as newlyweds now, and I have my loving wife back.